Welcome back. This is part 3 of my chain and sprockets tutorial. I'm Jeremy Snell. Part 3 is entitled Creating the Links and Sprockets themselves, as I briefly explained from part 2. I've opened up Lightwave here, opened up the same file again, so we're starting at the same place. We left off having created in part 1 the master pitch length, and point 36 and point 15 representing the spacing for the rollers, the center points for which are the rollers for our chain path. In part 2 we then went on and created the additional points for creating our splines, and we created our master spline guide, basically for our chain path to follow. We spent a long time working out the clone distribution, so that all of the points represented here, any 2 points would share our same master pitch value, so that we could literally wrap one roller of a link would center on here, and it would wrap to there, and each of these would be a pivot point for our link as well, and it would wrap itself around the whole chain. Briefly stated that the most accurate point would be the start point of our cloning operation. This would be exactly correct, and the further away from this point, the less accurate it would be. Okay, so, as we're now starting in the same place, hopefully this part's going to be a little more rewarding, as we're actually going to create some geometry. Before it was just playing with points, so now we're actually going to create our actual chain links themselves, and the sprockets for front and rear with 15 and 36 teeth, and there's a few methods I need to show you to creating them. So, first we need to copy the points representing the pitch length. We've got many layers we can select this from, but I'm going to select the one from the master pitch length. So, I'm going to select the top 2 points, could be the bottom 2, either 2. I'm going to copy those, paste them into the next available layer, which here is layer 8, so paste them down here. Now, I wish to have these centered because I'm going to work around the origin, and the tool I'm going to use for centering is under Modify, Translate. We have the center option here, which is F2 as the shortcut. So click this button or press F2, and you'll see it's scooted the points down to the center. So A to zoom in, we'll be working in the back view primarily again. I'm going to press I for information just to verify that they're in the correct location. The Y distance is set to 0, which is correct. It doesn't say mixed, so they share that value. They're sitting on the x-axis. We also need to check that they are, again, the same equidistant from the central line about the origin, so that they actually have the master pitch length. So, x 7.9375 and negative 7.9375 millimeters. Good, so cancel to that. Okay. Right, I'm going to be dealing with disks, so if I show you the reference image again, taking a look at the outer link here, bearing in mind that it is just a fraction smaller than the inner link, but it shares the same shape pretty much. The way this actual shape is made up of, if you think about 2 circles here, one circle on one side, one circle on the other, and they are connected together in the center. Okay, so bearing that in mind, we're going to be using disks. Flip back to Lightwave. We're going to be using disks to represent each of those sides, and we'll connect the 2 disks together. And we'll be using subpatch division for our final section here. So I'm going to maximize the back view. Now, under Create Disk, I'm going to hold down Control and create disk here. Now, for number of sides, I'm going to be using 6 sides for this. It's basically, if you imagine the fact that we're going to be cloning our links, and therefore all of the geometry we're going to create here, we're going to be cloning this 44 to 88 times, and that's going to create an awful lot of polygons, and the overall model of this will be in the thousands of polygons, so it's going to be quite a heavy duty chain here. Therefore, the fewer points and polygons you can get away with to create the look that you're wanting, the better it is for processing and rendering. So, I found that 6 works best for connecting together and also for giving the illusion of circles in the places we need them. So, size 6, I'm not worried about the rest of the values. So just going to create the disk here. I'm going to select the disk and T to move. It's going to move it over to this right point. Now, I need to align this disk centrally to this point here. So, just going to zoom in here. Also, for rotational purposes, having an even number of points actually tends to rotate more accurately than uneven ones due to centering, which I explained in a previous part. So, with a mode set to selection, I can show you that it's ticked here, that I'm action center selection, because we're working away from the origin here. I'm going to use the snap tool, so Shift G, with the drag set to all points as our selection. So, align the top points as they run vertically. So, click and drag, and we wish to snap them to the center point here. So that's snapped. Now the next thing we need to do is to rotate this disk 90 degrees so that these points lie along the x-axis in order for us to vertically align it, as we have no reference points here around the center. So, a couple of ways you can do this. You can either press R on the keyboard, which will rotate 90 degrees whatever object you have selected. That's just a shortcut. I can't find the actual nested tool button for it if there is one. Or you can use Y to rotate. So, I'll use Y in this case for rotation to activate the tool. Now, I explained earlier that if you click and hold down the mouse and use this freehand, then the smallest increment you can rotate by, the smallest increment you can rotate by is 1 degree. Now, as we're after 90, we can just click and drag until, looking in the numeric panel, it says 90. Now you can see that it's a little fiddly to get 90 exactly. So I'm just going to undo that, and I'm going to show you that if you hold down Control, it will constrain the rotation to 15 degree increments. So I'm holding down Control now. I'm going to do exactly the same, drag from left to right, and you'll see it's jumped from 15, 30, 45, 60, etc. So if we carry on bringing that round, we're looking for 90 degrees, which is there, and it's a lot easier to snap to that. So I'm going to let go of that, drop the tool, Shift G again, so now that we can vertically align these points with the center point, which represents the center of our roller. So, done. Now, because I'm a stickler for this, and I know Lightwave can be a little bit fussy, I'm going to loop select and check the alignment. So, I for information, we're looking for the same Y values, and Y is all set to 0, which is perfect, so I'm going to cancel that. Okay, I'm going to select connected, so I'm selecting everything to do with this disk. You can either do it in point mode or polygon selection mode, either works. I'm going to press Y again to rotate, and I'm going to rotate it back 90 degrees. As this is the orientation we would like it to end up in. Now, again, I'm just going to check that these center points now share the same Y value. So, I for information, X value, and it says that they are. It doesn't say mix, therefore they do share the same X value. So, cancel to that, deselect everything. We've now centrally aligned our disk to the center point of this roller for our master pitch length. Now, what we need to do is, as we will be using subpatch division, subpatches only work with 3 or 4-sided disks, or 3 or 4 points creating our polygons. Now this is 6-sided, and therefore it will not subpatch. So, what I need to do is to split this polygon down the center here, as it will create us 2 symmetrical quads, or polygons. One here, and one there. And that's going to be the easiest way for splitting this particular one. So, there are a few methods you can use for doing this. You can either use the split command, which I will be showing you, or you could, for example, use the kill command, which is K, to delete the polygon but keep the points remaining, and then just select, in a clockwise fashion, the points you wish to make up your polygon. Ignore the center point. So, P for polygon, deselect, and then select in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, P again to select, and deselect. I will just undo that to show you the splitting method. The way split works is it requires you to have selected your polygon in polygon selection mode, and then you need to swap over to point selection mode, so you can either press spacebar or click the point selection mode. I'm going to deselect any points that are currently in selection mode for point, bearing in mind if I ever flipped back to polygon selection, has retained the selection of the original polygon I've selected. So you select your polygon first, so it knows what it's going to affect, and then you need to tell it which 2 points you wish to split this polygon down. So the top center point and the bottom center point, I wish to split this polygon down this line. And you will find the split command under multiply, subdivide, split, and the shortcut for which is Control L. So click that, and it's done exactly the same thing. It has given us 2 polygons, one there, 2 quads. You can always check down in your polygon statistics windows what type we have here, and it says polygons with 4 vertices, and that's these 2. Right, the next thing to do is to mirror these 2 over to the other side, so that's Shift V, N to activate the numeric panel, across the x-axis and about the origin. That's correct, so accept those values. Now the next thing to note is that, as I hadn't selected just these polygons to mirror, it has also mirrored this point here in the centre. So we've now got a duplicate number of points on top of each other. So I'm going to press M for merge. Don't need to worry about keeping 1 point polygons, and click OK to that to eliminate 2 points, so that we remain with just 2 points as our centre points for locating. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom in slightly. We now have our 2 discs, which will subdivide quite well now to create our circles. We now need to connect the 2 together. So the logical stage, again, which is why I've selected 6-sided discs, is so that I can create a single quad in the centre. 1, 2, 3, 4 points in order. Press P to create your polygon and deselect. So we now have 5 discs representing the rough shape of our inner or outer link. Right, I'm just going to flip over to the reference image again, so we can actually take a fresh look at the shape that we're looking to create here. Now, 2 discs with a bowing section here to create a span, and then back into the outer disc. So you're looking for a sort of a rough stretched figure of 8, elongated. You can look at either one of these. So, with the inner disc with the inner link being slightly fractionally smaller. Now, if I flip back to Lightwave and I show you this in subpatches. So, tab is the shortcut for subpatch, and it's under Construct, Convert, and Subpatch, and it shows you that tab is here. So, I'm going to press tab, and you'll see that it's actually smoothed the whole object, and it's now created our rough shape that we required. Now, in order to more accurately create the shape, we need to kind of scale these discs out. So, I'll just show you this out of subpatch mode to start with. You need to activate symmetry mode so that we only have to do one operation at a time. So symmetry mode activated, it's either Shift Y or click the button here, and you can select, for every point it will select the mirrored point that is relating to it. So I'm only selecting these points around the outside, represent the disk, ignoring the center point on the right half of the screen. So we're going to be using the size tool, as this is a 2-dimensional object still. It has no thickness, it has no depth. So, using Shift H for the size tool, you can now scale this out or down, and you can see that it's emphasizing the shape. So, the important thing to remember when we're scaling this is that you can bring these 2 points in the center very, very close to each other, but do not cross each other, otherwise our polygon will end up pretty funky. So, I'm just going to press spacebar to drop the tool, spacebar to get into polygon selection mode, so that I can then subpatch this. Now I'm going to flip back to a point where we have them already selected, still in symmetry mode, back to Shift H for the size tool. I'm going to size this up and just eyeball a shape that I'm happy with to create the inner link. So, something along those lines here. I'm going to stop there. It just happens to be 130% of the size I originally created. Yours will probably be different. So, eyeball it to whatever your shape you're happy with. So, drop the tool and deselect. Take this out of subpatch, just to show you what it looks like here. I'm going to expand it so that we've got all views in place. Now, like me, you'll probably end up with certain polygons facing certain different ways. Now, I'd like them all facing forwards, So select the polygons. It's best to do this out of symmetry mode, so untick symmetry, just in case you don't have the same polygons. Select just the polygons that are facing the wrong way, and you can press the F key, which is a shortcut for flip. So press that, and it'll just spin the normals around to point in the correct direction that we want. Okay, the next thing to do is to give this link plate some depth. And if I flip back to my text file I created a while ago, you'll notice, or remember rather, that the link plate thicknesses are between 2 and 2.2 millimeters for both the inner and outer. And on the reference image, that refers to this thickness here and here. So I'm going to be using 2 millimeters for these here, as it's an easier one to deal with. For this I'm going to use the extrude tool, which can be found under multiply, extend and extrude, the shortcut for which is capital E, so that's Shift E. So I'm going to press Shift E on the keyboard, and I'm going to press N to activate the numeric tool panel, so N for numeric. Now we're looking at adding depth along the Z value, and I'll give it on a positive Z here. So in the Z box here I'm going to type in 2 mm for millimeters and hit tab, and we'll get our preview here, which I can rotate around. So we've got some thickness to it. I'm going to drop the tool. I'm happy with these settings. Now because we're dealing with subpatches, we have to think about sharpening the edges up. If I subpatch this now, you can see that it's actually rounded this top section as well. Now the reason for this is happening is because there isn't enough geometry or cuts within the edge of this polygon here, this object, to define for it to smooth around. I'm sure it'll make more sense when I actually give you a proper demonstration. So, in order to sharpen this up, we need to put 2 cuts down this line here. Now, you can either use the cut knife tool, or I would prefer to use the bandsaw tool. So, select 2 polygons in order. Under the multiply, subdivide, we have Bandsaw Pro. This is a nice tool as it gives you a working preview. So, activate the tool. I'm just going to clear the settings so we're all back to the beginning. You'll see that it's put in this provisional line here, this cut, and it's showing you where it's going to actually place its cuts. Now, for this to get the correct sharpness, we're going to need quite a close cut to the edge. So, I've actually worked out that 2% in this case gives us quite a nice sharp edge. So, if you type in 2 and hit tab, this will move it to 2%. Bandsaw Pro only works in percentages, not in fixed values like millimeters. So this orange line on the tool is representing where it's going to place the cut, and I would have to zoom in quite close for you to actually visibly see where it's going to place this cut. And it's on the right half here. Now, I wish to have this right half as sharp as the left half, so I need the same cut distance on the opposite side. I'm going to take advantage of the mirror tool within Bandsaw Pro here, and if you watch that, it'll then place a new band here on the right half, so click mirror. So we now have a slice at 2% and a slice at 98%, and it's reflected in this preview here. So I'm going to go with those settings, so click and drop the tool. I'm going to zoom out, deselect everything. Now if I subpatch this, hitting tab, you'll see that it's actually smoothed the edges over. I'm just going to show you this in textured view. You can either click on this view here and click on texture. Alternatively, I happen to have a keyboard shortcut set up to this, so I can just press 6 on my numeric panel to flip quickly between the views. Now a little bit on the subpatch division here. You can see here, depending on the clarity of the encoding of the video, there are actually jagged edges. You can noticeably see that the polygon points are showing for the subdivision. Now, I'm going to actually wanting to smooth this off just for the visuals at this stage. So I'm going to press O on my keyboard to bring up the general options. We have a little section down here called patch division, and this is to do with subpatch division. So it's set to 3 at the moment. That's a fairly standard setting. I'm going to crank this up, and the higher I crank this up, the smoother the results. So I'll show you the difference between 3 and 4. So it's already gone smoother. I'll now crank it up to 5, and OK. It's gone smoother again. So, crank it up to 6, and it's gone even smoother. Whether you can see the difference from 5 to 6 on the video that you're watching this on, I don't know. But, just for this stage, I'm going to work in subpatch division of 6, know that it is there, and also know that every one polygon has now been subdivided into 6 polygons as far as Lightwave is now concerned for displaying. Therefore, if you're looking at a large object with several polygons, it'll get very memory and CPU intensive, so rotating the object will become slow. So you may need to bring up these options and crank this value right down, which we'll no doubt need to do later. Okay, I'm going to take this out of subpatch division mode, and I think the next stage is to name this layer. So I'm going to double click here, and we're going to call this master underscore link underscore inner, because this is going to be the layer that represents the inner portion of the link of the chain. So OK to that. OK, the next stage is to copy this inner link. So Control C and paste it as the next available level, layer 9, so Control V to paste. I'm going to name this layer now, and we're going to call it master underscore link underscore inner. Inner we've already done, outer, as this will be the layer representing the outer link. So, as we have a duplicate of the inner link in place here, I'm going to place the master inner link in the background. Now, again, flipping back to the reference image in case you've got a short-term memory like me. Okay, we're going to be modelling the disk diameters fractionally smaller, so that we can actually get a better view when we're looking at the model, the final model of the chain. So, back to Lightwave. Again, all of this is done in the back view, and in this case, because this object now has some depth to it in the Z value, we can't use the size tool, so we'll have to be using the stretch tool. So, in the option panel down here, so activate symmetry mode, again, we're going to select just one half, bearing in mind we have the master inner in the background. Deselect the centering points. Press H to stretch. Now, a little about the stretch tool. We're going to hold down constrain proportions, which is the control key. If you moved the mouse left to right, it would constrain it in a horizontal factor. If you moved the mouse vertically, it would constrain to a vertical factor, i.e. horizontal. Undo that. Constrain now vertical. Okay, neither of those will actually give us the result we're looking for. So we're actually looking to constrain both the horizontal and the vertical values to keep them proportional. The way you do that is to move the mouse in a diagonal fashion. Now, you may need to attempt this 2 or 3 times in order to actually get it to work proportionally. But the place to look is under these values if you can't visually see the difference. So, hold down Control, from top, right, drag down bottom left. And I just happen to have hit it first time here. So you'll see that the values scale together. They're both sat on 81%. They're now both sat on 55%. So I can scale this up or down, and because I'm using symmetry mode, it will proportionally scale them, keeping the centering points. So, just going to eyeball the difference here. I want something visibly smaller in diameter, but nothing too small. So, you can literally just judge it by eye. Whatever you think. I'm going to go with about 86%. I'm quite happy with that. So I'm going to drop the tool and deselect that. Now, if I zoom out to show you in perspective window, this is what it now looks like. It's kept the same width because we use the stretch tool instead of the size tool. It hasn't altered the depth of this object. So the next thing to do is, because this is an outer link, we need to place it on the outside of the inner link. So again, I'm going to be using the snap tool. So while these layers are in this order, outer in the foreground, inner in the background, I'm going to loop select every point to do with the outer layer. And I'm going to be working in the right view, so I'll maximize that so I can get a good zoom in. Now I'm going to press T to move, and Control to constrain the movement along the Z-axis only. Just going to move it out so it's outside of the inner link, and then I'm going to zoom in as close as I can get so that I can see the top 2 points of both the inner and outer links in view, and clearly differentiate the difference. Now I need to put them both layers in the foreground, and using the snap tool, so Shift G, ensure that your drag selection is set to all points, so that everything to do with the outer link will be dragged towards the inner link. I'm going to align the outermost point of this link on the left. Holding down Control now, I'm going to drag along horizontally, and I'm going to snap align that to the outermost point here of the inner link. So, let go of that. I've now aligned these so that they are sitting flush on top of each other. So I, for information, shows that they share the same Z value, which just happens to be the origin. I zoom out to show all. This is now where we're at. Okay. Now the next stage, we'll be working back in just the master link outer layer. The next stage, if I flip back to the reference image, you'll see is to create this pinhead here for each of the sections. If you judge visually the distance between the external part of the circle disc compared to the inner diameter, you'll see, I don't know, you can just have to eyeball it really. It's perhaps a third or larger, something like that. Anyway, so just make a mental note of that. Now in order to do this, we're going to, out of symmetry mode, select the two polygons representing the original disk, making sure it's on the outside. And we're going to copy these, and we're going to paste them to the next available layer, layer 10. Paste them there. I'm going to put master link outer in the background, and I'm going to be working in the back view primarily, so I'll just magnify that and zoom in. Now, I'm going to merge these two disks, these two polygons together to create our original disk. Now, this can be found under Details, Polygons, and it's Merge Polys, the shortcut for which is capital Z, so Shift Z. So I'll click that, and it's got rid of the split, and it's merged the two polygons into one 6-sided polygon. Now, I'm going to use I can use Stretch or Size tool because it's a one-dimensional object, so I'm going to use Size tool because I only have to I don't have to worry about constraining the vertical and horizontal. So, click, drag, and we're eyeballing it. We're looking for roughly 40%, so that's a value that I'm happy with for the size of the pinhead. So, I'm going to leave it around 40% and drop the tool. Now the next part is to work in, just going to Shift A to zoom in on this section so we can get a clearer view of it. Now I'm going to use a bevel tool to bevel the pinhead outwards. Now, briefly flip back to the reference image. If we have the link width is 2 mm, and this is the width of the pinhead jutting out, and I'm going to guess that it's roughly half the distance. So half of 2 mm is going to be 1 mm, so I'm looking at beveling this out approximately 1 mm. It's all very rough at the moment, so back to Lightwave. If I hold down Control, I can constrain the proportions and move the mouse until the values show the correct shift value that I'm looking for, 1 mm, or I can use the numeric panel, and in this case, as I have a number in mind, 1 mm, I'm going to press N to activate this panel, and it's a shift. You can either slide this toggle here to 1 mm, or you can just type in 1 mm, and it's a positive 1 mm shift we need to create. So I'm happy with that. Drop the tool. Now, remembering again that when we subpatch this, we will need to then consider resharpening the edge. So I will look into resharpening the edge at this stage. So you can either run a cut down the outer portion, or you can run a bandsaw again, and I'm more comfortable with bandsaws, as I can pick a much closer edge. So, bandsaw probe, I'm going to clear these settings. I'm going to select something along the lines of probably 5 or 10%. 10% perhaps is close enough to the edge. Again, it's personal preference to whatever you feel. So, drop the tool. Accept the settings. Now the next thing, again, is to remember, in order to subpatch, you need 3 or 4 sided shapes, and this polygon here is our 6-sided shape, and it's showing as greater than 4 vertices, and therefore it will not subpatch. So again, we need to split this polygon in half as it was originally. So select the polygon, press spacebar to flip over the point selection, deselect all of the points that were selected. Now we can go in and select the points that we need to split across. So the top center point, zoom out, and then zoom back in, and the bottom center point. So Shift A to get that all in view, and then Control L is a shortcut for split. That's now split our polygon down the center. So if I subpatch this now, hit Tab, you can see that we now have the correct shape. I'm going to plot this into texture view, so you can see that we have slightly rounded edge here, and that's close enough to matching the pinhead. Okay, back out of subpatch mode, back into wireframe shade. One other thing I need to point out is that with both objects in the foreground, when you subpatch like this, because of the nature of subpatches, the way it rounds, it tends to sometimes, I don't know if I'm going to be able to show you this, but if I zoom really, really close in, I don't know if you can actually pick this up. If I select every polygon to do with the outer pinhead, even though we create it directly on top of this surface here, flush with the surface, when you hit subpatches, because of the smoothing and rounding of the edges you get, the locations won't necessarily be in the same place. And in this case, if you see this line here, this represents the edge of the pinhead on the inside. And if I deselect that, and I select this edge here, you can see that there's a gap about, yeah, there we go. If I press Ctrl E and measure this gap here, you can see the length down the bottom left. It's only 3 microns. But just be aware that there is a gap there, and obviously the larger scale you create your parts in the first place, the larger the gap potentially is. So the thing now to do is to select the whole pinhead, and what we're looking to do is to just intersect this slightly. So we're just going to push it in so that it definitely intersects and cuts in with this polygon face here. So there is no gap, and we won't get any anomalies when rendering. So T to move, just literally eyeball drag, hold down Control to constrain the proportions because we don't wish to move the pivot center, and just drag it in so you know and can visually see that it's definitely inside. It's now intersecting with the faces of this outer link. So, I'm going to zoom out, take it out of subpatch. Now the next thing to do is to, I'm going to place this in the background, so the next thing to do is to mirror this pinhead over, because we need one on each section. So, Shift V, N for numeric, it's previewed, X-axis is correct, around the origin, except the settings, that's fine. Okay, now the final thing to do is to cut the temporary layer, the pinheads, and paste them into the master link outer layer as they are part of this object. So, we now have the master inner link and the master outer link here, and they're lying on top of each other. Again, having said the same thing about the overlapping points here, how there could be a gap created when subpatching, this same could be said for the alignment with the way I aligned the inner and outer links together. There will probably be, again, possibly your 3 micron gap sat in between the two objects. Now, on a real chain, there is actually, well, whether you've heard of an X-ring or an O-ring chain or a type of chain, obviously these have to pivot and slide around each other, so there is technically going to be a gap in there, and then there's going to be some sort of ring inside these, depending on the shape of it, and then there's going to be pockets and channels separated within for lubrication. A chain's obviously a lot more complicated than we need to model for our purpose, so again, I'm just pointing these things out for you to be aware of. Okay, so we've created the inner and outer links. Now the next part is to create the roller section. So, just going to rename the next layer, layer 10, to master underscore link underscore. You should be able to guess this one. Roller, yep, cool. Okay to that. Okay, we're going to take some polygons from our master link inner. Now I'm going to take them from the inside section. We only need to copy one of them at this point, to create one roller. So you can see which polygons I've selected. So on the inside, so I'm going to copy those two and paste them to master link roller. So Control V, paste them there. Now, because they're facing the wrong way, this normal line is representing which way their face is pointing to. I'm going to press F to flip them so that they're facing the opposite direction. Okay. Now, I'm going to press Shift Z to merge the two polygons together to create one disk, back to our original disk here. Now, this disk, if I flip over to the little text file I created earlier, as we're creating the roller here, we have a roller diameter, which we know to be 10.16 millimeters. We also know that the roller width is 7.9375 millimeters, or half the pitch length. So, working on the diameter, we now have to size our disk to this 10.16 millimeters. So, back to Lightwave. The tool I'm going to use for this is the absolute size tool. It's quite a useful one. It lives under Modify, Transform, under the More tab, and it's the top of the list on mine. It's called Absolute Size. So if you click that, it pops up this panel here. Quick rundown. The reference is based on a bounding box. Now, what this means is that it draws a physical box around the extremities of the object you have selected, or in the layer currently. So this is the uppermost point, and this is the basemost point, the lowermost point. Therefore, the bottom of the rectangle it would create is here, and the top there. And again, the leftmost point is here, and the rightmost point is there. So it's created a rectangle in this shape, and therefore it's getting these values here from the shape of that box. Now, because we've picked 6 sides, and it's not symmetrical when it's rotated, it means that the width is obviously narrower than the height. And we're going to be using the height to fix our overall diameter for our roller. Now, in order to constrain the proportions, because these values are different, one's 13.05 millimeters, the other one's 15.08 in the Y value, being our greater height one, we need to use the locked function on the value in order for it, if you alter one of these values, it will then proportionally constrain the other values. So it'll run in a percentage, if you like. So, bearing in mind that, we're going to alter the Y value. So we're going to change that to 10.16 millimeters, and hit Tab for it to accept that. The action center, if this is all centered, it means that it will pick the center point of the bounding box, and it will, whatever settings you apply here will be applied about the center of that, which is exactly what we want for this disk. So I've altered just the Y value, it's set to locked, and I'm going to click OK to that. And it has now sized our disk down to 10.16 millimeters vertically. And as we're going to be subpatching this to create a perfect circle from it, it then holds the true dimensions that we're looking for. Right, so the next stage is to give our roller some depth, to give it our roller width. So again, I'm going to be using the extrude function, so that's Shift E, and then N for numeric, and again, Z is the axis we'll be using for depth, and we know the value to be 7.935 millimeters. And hit Tab. I'm just going to flip over to the text document to check that. So follow it, 7.93, right, 7.9375. So change that. 7.9375 millimeters. So correct that. Again, you can just use arbitrary values if you want, or just completely eyeball it for your project. It depends what it needs. But as I said at the beginning, I'm using real world figures here, so I'm going to try and be as accurate as I can. So accept that change. We've now got a depth and diameter of the correct width and values that we require. The next thing to do is to center this object about the Z-axis. So for this, I'm going to use the modify, translate. We can't use center with the F2 command because that will center it in all 3 axes, and we only wish to center this along the Z-axis. So the tool for that is under Translate, More, Center 1D, and you can pick X, Y or Z to center this about, and Z is the axis we wish to use, so click OK to that. You can verify that it has done so, again by selecting any 2 points opposite side, pressing I for information, and you can check the Z values to make sure one is the negative of the other, so 3.9688 and negative 3.9688 millimeters, so therefore it's correctly centered it. So deselect that. Now this disk face here, polygon, and this one here, they will be butted up against the inner portion of the chain, therefore they will never be seen, and therefore they are unwanted or unnecessary polygons, and as we're going to be duplicating many of these, the fewer polygons we have, the better we're going to have for processing and rendering. So just going to delete these. Also, that then leaves us with just quads, so that we can then subpatch this cylinder. So if I hit tab now to subpatch it, it's now subpatched into a circle. Alright. Okay, the next thing to do is to mirror this over. This now represents one roller, so I'm going to press Shift V, N for numeric, X axes about the origin 0, 0, 0, accept those values. So we've now got two rollers at the exact length apart. Okay, now with the master link inner in the background, okay, there's a stage I need to do first, and that is to copy the centering points, as we'll be using those guys for every layer pretty much. So you can pick them from any layer. This layer is as good as any, so just copy those. I'm going to paste them into the master link roller layer. Paste, and there you go. Now, we do have multiple points, and as we only technically need one in each roller, we can delete some others. So I'm going to deselect the ones I want to keep, and I'm just going to delete those two. So we now just have these. Alright. Okay, the next thing to do is to do some alignment. So with the master link inner and the master link outer in the foreground, I'm going to loop select every point that makes them up, and then I'm going to place the rollers into the foreground as well. Now, literally I wish to butt the end of the inner plate up with the end of the roller. So T to move, holding Control down to constrain the proportions to the Z axis only, move it out roughly, and then I'm going to maximize this viewport so I can get a better zoom level. Okay, I'm going to move it slightly closer, holding down Control still, so that I can get an even better zoom level, because I need to distinguish the 2 points. So now using Shift G for our snap tool, selection set to all, the outermost point of the inner link, click, holding down Control to drag it, snap it to the outer point of the roller. So these 2 points are now aligned. So drop the tool, deselect everything. Okay, this is what we're left with now. Okay, so it's coming along now. You can see that we've got the majority of our links to. The next thing to do now obviously is to create the opposite side of these links. And the way we can do that is simply through a series of mirroring. We can start with the inner link. So select that layer, and press Shift V to activate the mirror tool, N to activate the numeric portion of it. Now X-axis no longer is applied here. We wish to now mirror it across the Z-axis, so click on the Z-axis and it will give you the preview to make sure it's correctly mirroring. Ensure it's around the origin and accept those values and drop the tool. So that's the inner links mirrored. We now do the same thing with the outer link, so Shift V, N for numeric. It's going to keep the same value in the correct axis, so accept those values, drop the tool. We don't need to mirror the roller because that's already been set up correctly. So this is what we're now dealing with. We now have pretty much a complete inner link here, represented with 2 rollers and the 2 link plates, and then we have the outer link. So the next thing to do is to change the location of this outer link, because they do not sit on top of each other. So we need to offset this by one roller length, or rather one pitch length. So it's easy enough to do. Again, I'll work in the back view on this case, so I can pan over to here. Okay, so with the outer link in the foreground, loop select every point relating to that, and then we can put the inner link in the background. Now, press T to move, and I'm just going to roughly drag it over so that I can see through in the background the center points. Now, this is the first part where the center points actually becoming useful. So, master link in the foreground as well, otherwise the snap tool will have nothing to snap to activate to. Shift G to activate the snap tool. Hold down Control to constrain the movement only to the horizontal. Drag until you snap into place. Let go. Zoom out. Get all views back. I'm going to put all three link layers into the foreground. This is now the stage we're at, where we're dealing with. This is now correctly set up, so we have, from the inside working out, we have two rollers connected together with the inner link plates, both the inner and outer section. Then we have offset by one pitch length the outer link plates with pinheads represented. There's no point in connecting the two pinheads together because they will go through the centre of a roller. There will be a roller in this location here as well. It's just this is the basic makeup of a chain for cloning. Right, the next final thing to do is, again, as I mentioned before about subpatching, when you subpatch it will round off the edges here. So we could end up potentially with a gap here in the rollers. So, with the rollers in the foreground and the inner link layer in the background, I'm going to maximise the right view and zoom in here. So, again, as we did with the pinheads, I just want to stretch the width of the roller so that it intersects and cuts into the inner plates, so that there is no gap for rendering. There won't be any issues, even though you probably won't be looking at such an angle or a zoom level. It's probably just good practice to do so. So, ensure that your action center is around selection still. Press H to stretch. We can't use size because that will alter our diameter. Holding down Control, moving from left to right. We only need to intersect ever so slightly, and 105% in this case is enough, or 106, it doesn't matter. I mean, you could do 130, as long as you don't poke it out the other side, basically, as long as it intersects. So 105% I'm going to go with. Spacebar to drop the tool, flip back out to all layers. So you can just see here that it's cutting inside this disc now. Okay, I'll just briefly show you all of this in subpatch. This is the stage we're at, and in textured view, it's actually coming along quite nicely now. Okay. Okay, the next thing we need to do now is to assign some surfaces to this. Now, if you wish to use parts for your selection later, you can assign part names, or if you prefer to work as surfaces, then you can assign surface names. Now, for this purpose, I'm going to assign surface names. So, we're going to start with the master link inner, yes, the master link inner, and zoom to fit. Now, there is only one surface here that makes up this whole plate, so the shortcut is Q on the keyboard. So Q to bring up the Change Surface tab. We're going to name a new surface. We're going to call this link underscore inner, and I'm going to keep this same sort of link prefix for all of them so that we know it corresponds to the chain. So I'm going to click OK to that. This has now been assigned surface of link inner. You can always check your surfaces in polygon selection mode, as surfaces only relate to polygons and not points. This was the part section I was mentioning, where you could create names for paths. Otherwise it's surface here, and if you click that, as we only have one layer activated and we've changed every polygon relating to that layer to link inner, you can now select it via surface name. So, okay, so continuing along the theme, we've done the inner link, we're now going to go onto the roller. Again, this is only one part, therefore only one surface is required, so Q. Change the end portion from link underscore roller, so OK to that. And now the link outer has two parts to it. It consists of the pin heads and also of the outer links themselves. So we can start with either or. So select one polygon from each of the 4 pins, and then you can press select connected, or under view, and where is it under view selection, and you have connected here, which is the right square brackets on your keyboard. So just click that, it'll highlight every selected polygon, and then press Q to change surface. I'm going to assign this to link underscore pin, and then click OK to that. And finally, if you click one polygon from each of the outer links themselves and select connected, press Q to change the surface, and now instead of link underscore pin, we're going to call this link underscore outer. Okay, I'm going to put all of these in the foreground, and I'm just going to zoom in this panel here. I'm going to bring up the surface editor, which the shortcut for which is F5. So if I click that, I'm going to assign some, see if I can't get this in view. Not really, I don't actually have that much screen real estate here to show you. So, something like this anyway. It's just to give you a visual representation. It shows that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 surfaces. Default is from our previous calculations, and we've got the 4 new assigned surfaces. So, I'm just going to give them a colour to differentiate each part, just for visual reference. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Shift and select all of these, and I'm going to activate smoothing. And then I'm going to go back to each layer one at a time. Under colour, I'm going to click on this colour swatch block here, and this pop up the colour picker. Depends on which colour picker you have assigned for yours. I'm going to pick some fairly pastel colours, if you like, some fairly washed out colours, but just enough to differentiate each one. Now I'm working on link inner, which is basically a silver colour, but I'm just going to use a light washed out pastel blue to represent that, and it's changed the colour of this every part for the inner link. The outer link is a gold colour, so again, click the swatch. I'm going to pick a very dull yellow, or in fact a goldy colour. Assign that to that, so everything which is a link outer surface now has this assigned to it. The pin, well, it's a silver colour, but I just want to differentiate it, so I'm going to go for like a pinky purple, pinky blue, so OK to that. And again, the rollers themselves are possibly a goldy colour, but again, I just want something to differentiate it, so I'm going to pick a red, and click OK to that. So I'm going to close this panel down, press A to fit all, just so that you can visually see now each part has a surface assigned to it, and is different. So if I tab to subbatch, go into texture view, you can now see. So when you come to texturing later on, you can change. You can see which one corresponds to which, just in case you picked a name that was a little bit off. Alright. Now the reason it's very important at this stage to assign your surfaces is because if you've waited until you've cloned every single link, if we've got like 88 rollers or 44 links around our entire chain, you're going to have a devil of a job trying to select each one of these polygons to then assign surfaces to. It's just going to be more work than it's worth, so do that at this stage, save yourself a bit of a nightmare later. Okay, now that we've done that, I'm going to hit S to save this file, as we've done a significant update, so I don't want to lose that. Okay, that's done. Okay, the next thing to do, the next fun stage, yeah, honest, is to move on to creating the sprockets themselves. So, I mean, we've made the links first because we need to know the size and polygon shape of our rollers in order to make our teeth to fit correctly inside. Think of it as a mould. We take one as a cast and we use that as a mould for the other one. So the place to start is by creating a single master tooth for our sprockets. So, going to go to layer 11 and rename this to master underscore tooth. So this will be the next layer we're going to be working in. So we need to have master link roller in the foreground. I'm just going to zoom to fit that. Now, if you look in the back view where the mouse is, these are our rollers here, naturally. One sprocket tooth will come in here from this angle here, will bed up inside this sprocket. The sprocket tooth will actually bed up inside this and mate up against the edge of this roller in order to generate friction. It's got to be touching it, and therefore it can generate the torque to push and pull the whole chain around. So it's going to be butting up against this edge. It's going to have a bit of a point up here, and then it's going to again brush against these edges here. Now, the best way to accurately have the surfaces touching is basically to steal these polygons that we've created here, and that gives us a nice match. So the polygons we're interested in for the teeth will touch the following 4 polygons, these 4 here. So select those and copy those into the next layer 11 master tooth, paste them in, and as they are now facing the wrong way, I'm going to press F on the keyboard to flip them so that they are now facing the correct way. At this stage I'm going to press Q to assign a surface to them as we're into this. So Q, surface. I'm just going to call this sprocket to give it a surface of sprocket, and while we're in this panel here you can actually assign a colour here. I'm going to turn smoothing on and click the colour swatch here, and we're just going to give it a green colour as it's one we haven't used yet. So OK to that and OK to that. So I'm just going to give you a quick demonstration as to how well they fit together. If I put master link roller in the background, obviously out of subpatch mode, when we're just using faces, they're going to fit exactly, just the polygons are flipped and facing the opposite way, so they're facing each other. So you're not going to see any difference here, because they merge that exact. Now, if I put both layers in the foreground and hit tab to turn them into subpatches, and then I'll put master link roller in the background again, and I'll maximise the back view and zoom in. If I highlight these polygons to make it clearer for you to see, this is how well they sit in now. The side of the tooth of the sprocket follows this exact curve where it just brushes and touches against the side of it and then leaves away from it, and then it will come up to the top to a peak and then down and brush into the side of this other roller. That's how well the mating is going to be for this demonstration. So take them out of subpatch, back into all views, and we're going to be creating the tooth itself now. So into point selection mode we need to basically connect the two together using quads. So select in order in a clockwise fashion. 1 point, 2 point, 3, 4 points. Press P to create a polygon and deselect. Again, same thing, create more polygons. So 1, 2, 3, 4, select in clockwise order, and then P to polygon. Rotate it around to the other side, exactly the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, P polygon, 1, 2, 3, 4, P polygon. Finally, we need to cap the top off, so 1, 2, 3, 4, P for polygon. Okay. This is now our tooth sitting inside the rollers. Okay, the next thing to do is to, with the master link roller in the background, it's going to be easier. So select the top polygon, and we're going to bevel this upwards. So if I just zoom in slightly here. So B to activate bevel. I'm going to do this in a couple of stages just to make it easier to follow. Hold down Control to constrain proportions. Click the mouse and we're going to move in a vertical fashion to extend this polygon and bevel it upwards. So click, drag, and we're looking to, you don't want to drag it higher than the top of the roller, as you might get some collision issues. So it's got to either be at the same height or just within. So anywhere there is good enough for me. And the next thing to do is to drop that tool. We're going to use the stretch tool, so H for stretch. I'm going to do this in 2 sections again. The first thing we're going to do is to create more of a point at the top, so kind of a peak if you like. So working in the back view, I'm going to hold down Control and move from right to left to make this gap smaller. Observe in the perspective and every other view you wish. So, click, hold. This is just purely eyeballing. Just going to eyeball a peak. So, somewhere around there is good enough. It just happens to be 25%, so 25% of the original value. Okay. The next part is, if I flip to the reference image, well, I've still got this tool activated. I don't know whether you can see, I may need to, if I zoom in somewhat on this image, hopefully it won't go too blurry, you should be able to see here a slight difference in colour. And I'm assuming that this is a slight, I don't know, there's a sort of a crease there where this goes inwards, so it tapers in from this point here to more of a point at the top. It's still got quite a width, but it doesn't quite have the same width here. So, that's how I'm going to model this one anyway. So, again, back to Lightwave with the stretch tool. You can do it in either the top view or the right view. It doesn't matter, but observe in the perspective as well. So, click, drag. In the right view, I'm going to move from right to left. Just want to make this ever so slight. So, I'm looking at, let's round it up, 80%, thereabouts, just to have it slightly tapering in. Okay, spacebar to drop the tool, deselect. Okay, now if I subpatch this now, you can see that we've got a bit of sharpening up of the edges to do. So, let's take that out. First thing to do, I'm going to use bandsaw for this again. I'm going to select 2 polygons along the loop that I wish the bandsaw to run down. Multiply, Bandsaw Pro for the preview. I'm just going to clear the values out. Now, this has got to be a fairly sharp edge, so I'm going to be using a value of probably 2% we'll be looking at. So, put in 2%. Again, I'd have to zoom in a long way for you to see that it actually is very close to the edge. And I'm going to mirror that over. Whether you do this in subpatch mode or out of subpatch mode, it's up to you. I'm choosing to show you this out of subpatch mode first, so that you can see how close to the edge I'm actually creating this. I find it's a little hard to follow along when you create this in subpatch mode. The advantage of using subpatch mode when you're doing the bandsaw is that you can get a visual interaction with how sharp the edge is going to look. So, either way, there's an advantage. So, accept those settings, deselect everything. I'm going to Shift A to zoom in to fit to the tooth, and I'm going to press Tab to subpatch, so that now you can see that we have actually sharpened the edges, and it's got some proper width to it now. Okay, the next thing I wish to do is to have a crease down this section here. If I show you in textured view, you can see it just rounds up all the way to the top. There's no definite begin where it tapers in. So, the way I'm going to do that is to run another bandsaw very close to the top of this line here. So I'm going to select 2 or 3 polygons which run around the top of this tooth, and I wish to have the bandsaw running very close to the bottom of this selection. So again, I guess you could use the knife tool to cut this yourself if you prefer. So bandsaw, clear the values out, use a value of approximately, let's try 2% to start with. This 2% is actually showing at the top, so I wish to have it to be at the bottom, so I'm going to use the reverse function. This is now at 98%, so it's running it down the bottom. So, drop the tool, accept the settings, Shift A to zoom in again, Tab, and into texture view. So you can now see that this is actually flattened out the top of the tooth here, and it's got this taper and a visual crease here. So, if I now put the roller into the foreground as well, actually, let me just take this out of subpatch and then put the roller in the foreground and then subpatch both of them. You can now see how the two merged and fit together. I can show you possibly quite clearer on this viewport in the back. I will just highlight the roller to show you that it fits around the tooth just as smoothly as it did earlier. Okay, so back out of subpatch mode, fit all views. The next stage is to bear in mind the thickness of the sprocket. Now this tooth will actually be used as the thickness for the whole sprocket. And if I refer back to both the reference image and the text document I notes about it. Now, the sprocket obviously has to fit within this chain so that when it wraps itself around it doesn't hit the side of it, and then that'll derail the chain, and that's no good at all. So it's got to be fractionally smaller, or the width of which has to be fractionally shorter than the link width. And under here, under sprocket thickness, I had a setting written down which was between 85 and 90% of the overall roller width, or just the roller, the inner section of it. So, with that bearing in mind, we are now going to alter the actual width of this tooth. So, I'm going to put the roller diameter in the... Actually, we can... It doesn't matter. We'll keep the roller... Actually, it's best to work on the master link inner, as we did stretch the rollers out somewhat. We'll work in the right view, A to fit all. Now, you can see here that because we took the 105% roller width, the altered roller width, as our tooth guide, we will actually need to stretch this further in than the 90% minimum. So, H for stretch tool, holding down Control to constrain proportions, so that's width only. We're operating mode selection still. So, holding down Control, click, and drag from right to left. And if we pick a value of, say, if we put the minimum value 85%, that'll be within the tolerance range. You can see that there is a clear visible gap either side. So this sprocket will now fit within our chain link, which is exactly what we need. So, drop the tool, and OK to that. The final point we need is we need the centering points again as a reference. So, go to your master roller link and select the two centering points and copy those, and go to your master tooth layer again and paste them back in there. Now, these points obviously represent the center points for the rollers where they mate into the side of the tooth, and we need this for accurately positioning the height for the diameter of our sprocket. What we're going to do is we're going to copy our master tooth, including the centering points. So copy that, Control C, and paste it into the next layer, layer 12. Control V. We're going to rename this layer to master underscore sprocket underscore 36 and T. Now, working in the back view, we'll just maximize that and zoom out somewhat. We need to have we need to get the diameter correctly. Now, we need to move this up basically to pattern around 36 times for our array. 3, 2, 1. What am I talking about? 3, 2, 1. OK. Loop select all of the points relating to master sprocket 36T, and then you need to place point 36 layer also into the foreground. And if you remember, we created this to work out the diameter for our original sprocket for our 36 teeth. So this is where we're actually going to start using it. You press T to move, hold down Control to constrain the proportions to the Y axis only, and move this closer to the top, and then I can zoom in and get a more accurate view. Now, these are the center points for the rollers, and these are the center points for the rollers for the teeth. Now, bear in mind that the points represent the path of the chain, more specifically the center points of the rollers themselves. This tells us where to place our tooth to create the sprocket, so vertically. So we're going to use a snap tool, Shift G, hold down Control, click the center point, snap it to the 36 point center point. Drop the tool, zoom out. Okay, you can deselect. We're only now dealing with the 36T layer. We no longer need these centering points for the rollers on this layer because they've served their purpose. We've snapped it into the correct diameter, so you can just delete those 2 points. So that's deleted. This is where we're going to start creating our radial array for actually patterning this single tooth around 36 times about the Z-axis. So the shortcut for which is Control Y. So this brings up the array tool. click radial, Z-axis, because X and Y is on the screen, Z is coming in and out of the screen, and we wish to array around this. Ensure it's around the origin, and do not have merge points ticked, as again. So, number of teeth, 36 required, and click OK to accept those values. Now, this has created 36 teeth around. If I zoom in at the top, one thing I must point out, the corner, the base flange of this tooth, they do not meet, they actually overlap each other. So, if I show you that in the zoomed out, in the perspective window, this is the top tooth here, and you can see here that where the teeth have been patterned around, they actually overlap. So this is no good in its current state, as if I tab to convert this to subpatches, you can see it's nice and round here at this portion, but as they don't join, it cannot round and smooth between the two. So we get this peak and point here, and as they don't lie on top of each other, we cannot use the merge function at this stage to merge the points. So just undo that. If I hit M now to merge points and click OK, you'll see that no points have been eliminated, so that's no good to us. What we need to do now is to find the average point, or the midpoint, exactly in the middle of these two, where each of these points lie, basically. If you see that we're dealing with rows of polygons here, this polygon runs down here and will line up, and we need it to connect to this, sorry, not that polygon here, this thin polygon here, where they overlap on the vertical. You can see on the top view they line up perfectly. Likewise, this polygon needs to meld with that polygon there, and we need the average distance in between. So rather than being fiddly and trying to work out this intersecting cross point here, we can, the actual height of which, it doesn't really matter so long as they do find a center point somewhere. So we're going to take advantage of the weld average tool here. Now, let me just zoom out. In the back view, we only need to be concerned with one tooth for this operation. So you can select the top center tooth, because we know that's in the correct place. Select connected, so we're only dealing with this tooth. And then you need to consider using the intersecting points, or the intersecting polygons that relate to it, which is basically this section here. So it's 1, 2, 3 polygons cut into this section here. We don't need to worry about this base polygon here, because the points are shared on the top section here. So, holding down Shift, you can also select these 3 polygons here. So that's 1, 2, 3 selected. So you can actually loop select, is probably easier to add those in. Okay, now there's 2 ways you can do this section. You can either hide these current ones, delete the rest and then unhide them, or you can Control X, which I'll do now, cut these polygons, delete, and Control V to paste them back in. They both end up with the same result. Okay, now I prefer to work in colour wireframe for this, or any of the wireframe modes. I have a shortcut set up on my numeric panel. I can just flick quite easily between shaded, textured, wireframe, colour wireframe, etc. Now the reason I find this easy is because it allows you to select through polygons. You don't need to worry about polygons blocking your selection points. Now, maximize the perspective window. So you can see that we need to work out the average of these 2 points here. So that's this set of points here. We need to work out the averaging section for this. So as these work in pairs, these 2 correlate together, as you can see vertically. These 2, and then these 2 work together, and these 2, we need to find the average center point between these 2. There are actually 2 methods you can use. You can either select 2 of the points that you need to merge, bring up the size tool, so Shift H, and then you can From the right, click and drag to the left, and if you look in the numeric panel, make sure the scaling factor says 0.0%. Very important. When that's done, you can drop the tool and you can press M for merge, and that'll merge these 2 points that are selected down here. So M for merge, OK, because we have scaled them together to the average point of their locations. They have now both been merged, so we now have 1 point remaining. Now, that was a two-step operation. That was size and then merge. Now, the weld average tool does both of those operations with the click of one button. So, select 2 points you wish. It's found under the Details tab, under Points. It's called Weld Average. There is no shortcut for this, unless you set one up. So, 2 points selected, click Weld Average. Select the pairs, click the 2, Weld Average. Click the 2, Weld Average. We've now welded one side and worked out the average distance between the intersecting points. We now need to do exactly the same for the opposite side. So, loop select, and then I zoom in to fit. So, 1, 2, weld average, 1, 2, weld average, 1, 2, weld average, and the final 2, weld average. Zoom out to show. Back to wireframe shade. If I subpatch this, because these are merged now, you'll see that it can actually smooth around the shape. So, no more jaggy parts. Out of subpatch. Now, as these were just guides, these 6 polygons, 1, 2, 3 on each side, 1, 2, 3, so 6 polygons selected, they are no longer needed, as they are part of the next neighbouring teeth. So, delete those. I'll flip back to this view, zoom out so I can see the origin, as we're going to redo our array. Control Y, same settings, no merge, 0, 0, 0, 36, Z-axis. I'm not having merge ticked because I'm just going to show you that it is going to merge correctly. So, OK to this. Zoom into a top tooth. You can see now that the array has successfully aligned the points together. If I loop select one of these, there are 8 points in this location. So, with each single point visible, there are in fact 2 points lying on top of each other. So that's 2 selected, another 2, 4. So when we're going to use the merge tool, we're looking at, I'll bring up the calculator, 8 points times 36, because we've arrayed 36 times, gives us 288. If we divide that by 2, because we wish to have only half of the points eliminated, we're looking for 144 points to be eliminated in this operation. So, press M for merge. OK to that. Look down the bottom, 144 points have been eliminated. So, now when I subpatch this, you'll see it smoothed the gap between the teeth. So I can zoom out, and it's done that for all of the teeth, etc., all the way around. Okay, so that was a successful operation. I'm going to take that out of subpatch mode, as it's bogging down the computer slightly at this patch division level. So, the next part we need to do is to create the centre of the sprocket. We've done the teeth, and we've sharpened the edges of the teeth. So, there are 2 methods you can do this. I'll show you method 1 on the 36 tooth sprocket, and I'll show you method 2 when we create the 15 tooth sprocket. Now, method 1, this is actually the easier method, so I will zoom or maximise the perspective window. This is going to take advantage of the loop selection command. So, you need to zoom in quite close until you can distinguish that there is a difference between the 2 points here. So you need to select the outermost point, select one point, scroll along to its neighbouring point. Oops, too close. Let's try again. And then select that point. So we have 2 points sharing along the same line. Then you can take advantage of the View, Selection, More, and depending on how you've scaled Lightwave, it may be under More again. It's at the top, it's called Select Loop. So if you click that button, what it's done now is it has selected 36 points around the edge of this loop. Now, if yours hasn't worked, sometimes it doesn't allow you to do this operation. If it hasn't worked, then you'll need to hold on until I create the 15 tooth sprockets, where I can show you the way to get around that. Now, we need to select the same 36-point loop on the opposite side of the sprocket, so you can start at any position, any tooth, whether I pick this one or the next one or anything, it doesn't matter. So again, the outside point, and then its next neighbouring outside point. So you've selected 2 with the original 36 selected, so we now have 38 points in total. It'll remember the point order that you've selected them in, just like our spline creation did. Again, view, selection, more, select loop. We've now got 72 points selected. If I zoom out, you can see we've got both outer loops selected. So, just going to flip to all views. Now, it's very important that we have mode set to origin in this case, as we've created the sprocket around the origin with our array. So, set your action center to origin. We're going to be using the multiply, extend, extender plus feature here to create a new row of polygons. Now, the shortcut for which is E on the keyboard. It's very important that you click this once and once only. It may not look as if it's done anything, but until you move the points, it will look exactly as if you have done nothing, basically. So, I'm going to click the button so that you can see I've actually done something here. So, click once now. Visually, nothing has changed. And now I'm going to press the H key to get up the stretch tool. And it's very important, as this has depth, that we use the stretch tool and not the size tool to constrain the proportions. So, holding down Control and moving in diagonal fashion from top right to bottom left. Click, drag, see, undone that one. Undo that once, click, drag diagonally down. And you can see what it's done in the perspective view. You've got an extra row of polygons that you've now created, and you're stretching the center point to it. Now, if you've got an idea for how large you wish your central spindle to be for your sprocket hole center, then by all means create it to that size. I don't have a guide, so I'm just going to click it to there. It's an arbitrary value, it can be anything. Drop the tool, deselect. Okay, we've now got the most of our sprocket center on both sides created. Okay, I'm going to maximise the perspective view and zoom in towards the centre somewhat. We now need to create the centre itself. So, I'm going to use the loop select tool again. So, click neighbouring 2 polygons, view, selection, more, select loop. Create a polygon out of this loop as it selected them in order. So, P, polygon. Okay, can deselect, deselect down to polygon selection mode as well. Point selection, exactly the same on the opposite side. Select 2 points, view, select, more, select loop. P, polygon, deselect. Now, deselect everything. Zoom out to fit. We now got 2 polygons representing the centre of the sprocket. Now, we need them to be connected so that we actually have a physical whole. We're going to take advantage of Lightwave's bridge tool for this. It saves you having to do a bit of fiddly joining, stretching, sizing, and merging points. So, the way the bridge tool works is that it requires the same number of points. For example, we're using a disk here with 36 sides. It needs to have a disk on the opposite side with 36 points as well, so that it can locate the points and snap one point like for like to the other. So, select polygon 1, and on the opposite side select the other polygon 2. Under construct, it lies under combine, and it's the bridge tool. There is no shortcut. So, click once, and you can see what it's done. It's punched the hole through and deleted the disks, and it's connected everything through the center here. So, wonderful tool. Saves quite a lot of time. If at this stage I subpatch this object, you will see that it's going to require some sharpening. If your object at the end of the day is going to remain as faces and not subpatches, then this will be fine as it is. You may wish to undo certain amounts of sharpening here for the teeth, or you may need to put in more detail or less detail. That depends on your project and how close you're going to be zooming into. For this, I'm just going to use subpatches just to round off the tutorial. So, if I subpatch this now, you'll see that the edges will require some sharpening. So if I tip tab now, it's stretched and pulled all of the polygons and tried to round about the outer edge here are the teeth, and it's also flattened the centre up. If I put this in texture view, you can see what it's done. The centre now has almost a point in the middle. and the outer teeth have been stretched considerably far down in the centre point, so it's giving us these nasty looking edges that we don't want. So, back out of subpatch mode. We're going to run the bandsaw tool again, so we're going to have a cut running very close to the top of this point here, and we're also going to require one down at the bottom here very close to the central disc. So select 2, it doesn't matter if you select clockwise or if you select anti-clockwise. Multiply, bandsaw pro, I'm going to clear the values. I'm going to start again at 2%, so we're going to have it very close to the edge. I'm going to hit tab so it actually makes that change. So it's running very, very close to the top at 2%. I'm going to mirror it, so we have another cut at the opposite side, so we've got 2% and 98%. So at the top there, and near the centre here. So I'm going to accept those values and drop the tool. Now, it's very easy to forget at this stage that you actually have another side to your sprocket, so you need to do the exact same operation on the opposite side. So select 2, bandsaw probe, it retains the same settings, click, deselect, drop the tool. Okay, now we'll actually need to do one more sharpening. If I hit tab to subpatch things now, and you can see that it's not particularly sharp in the centre. While it's cured the problem around the edges near the teeth, the centre is now a little too rounded and it requires to be pretty sharp. Show you the reference image. This has an extra dome and has many holes cut into and bored into it. I'm just going to do a very simplified sprocket for this demonstration. You can go to town and do all the details properly. But anyway, the point is that the central part is actually quite sharp. So, you can either do this in subpatch mode, it's quite clear which polygons we're going to select, or if I tab to get out of subpatch mode, you can do this in faces mode. So, bandsaw pro. Now the idea is to match the curve, the roundness or the sharpness of the edge you have at the top of this sprocket with the sharpness here you have at the inside of the sprocket. So, it's actually, I'm going to undo this. It's actually going to be better to run this in subpatch mode for this purpose. So if I select some polygons here, 2 polygons in a row, and bring up the bandsaw pro tool, I can put this into texture view or smooth shade. And the thing to do is to look at this highlight here on this edge, and you look at the width of the highlight, and you've got to try and match that to the inside sprocket. And so I'm going to clear this and start with nothing. And start off with 10%, and because I wish this to be the same sharpness on either side, I'm going to click mirror. Okay. Let's accept that changes and deselect. Okay, that's close enough. It's given us a nice sharp edge anyway. So that was 10%. I mean, you can 5%, 2%, 30%, whatever you feel. Okay, back out of subpatch mode. This has now created our complete rear sprocket with 36 teeth. Now, the next stage, obviously, naturally, is to create the 15-tooth sprocket. So, exactly the same process as before. I'll be going through this one a little bit quicker, as it's about, let's see, 1:45 in the morning, and I'm a bit tired. So, double-click layer 13. We're going to name this master underscore sprocket underscore 15T for 15T sprocket. OK to that, we're going to go to our master tooth layer. This is exactly the same principle I'm using that I've created for the 36 teeth one. So, copy master tooth to our new 15T layer, paste it in there. Zoom out some, you need to work in the back view. Loop, select all of the points, including the centering points for the top of the teeth, scroll up, and we need to also put point 15 into the foreground. Now this is obviously a smaller sprocket, so I don't need to zoom out as far. So, Shift G to operate the snap tool. We need to snap the centres of the roller's location to the centre of the roller location, so that we now have fixed our sprocket at the correct diameter, or radius. Okay, deselect that, back to just the 15T layer. We no longer need these points as they were for the aligning to get the correct radius. Delete those, we're now into the radial array, so Control Y. Again, same settings about the origin, do not merge. We're looking at 15 array pattern, 15 clones of this tooth. So, OK to that. Zooming in at the top, again, we're looking at this same overlap and intersection issue, so this needs to be cleared up. It will be a different overlap to the 36 teeth one because of the diameter of the sprocket. So you could not, for example, take the 36 tooth one from here and work that out, as it would still overlap. So the thing to do now is highlight the polygons that you know are the only ones you're going to be dealing with, which are these. The whole of that one tooth, plus the 3 on one side and 3 on the other side. So, I'm going to cut these, delete the rest, don't need them, and Control V to paste these back in. Okay, we're at the stage now. Maximize perspective, I'm going to work in color wireframe. I'm going to do this somewhat faster, and this is where we do the weld average tool. So, pick them in pairs, go to Detail, Weld Average. Pick your pairs, Detail, Weld Average. Be very careful which pairs you pick, make sure you pick the correct pairs. Weld average, weld average. Zoom out. We have correctly merged one section. Now we need to deal with the other side. So, pick your pairs, weld average. Pick your pairs, not bananas, weld average. 1, 2, weld average. 1, 2, weld average. Zoom out. Flip back to shaded. Tab, subpatch. Texture, you can see it smoothed them out. They are welded. Okay, these 6 polygons are no longer needed. That's 3 selected, 3 off the other side, 6 total. Delete them. Maximize this back view so you can see the origin. Control Y, 15 radial array again. OK to that. Zoom in. Because of our weld average operation, we have now successfully aligned these points so that they will array around and merge together. 8 points selected, so quick calculator says 8 times 15, because that's our pattern, equals 120, divided by 2. 60 points we're looking to be eliminated when we hit merge. So, M to merge, OK. Down the bottom, 60 points eliminated, perfect. Tab to subpatch, check the perspective, you'll see that it's all smoothed them all correctly now. Everything is working as intended. Now, we need to create the centre of the sprocket, so I'll take out a subtouch. Now, I did mention to you earlier that there were 2 methods. I showed you the loop selection and then extend. Should that not work for you, which it should, but should it not work for you, then there is another method you can use. So, this is where we deviate from the previous method. I'm going to work in the back view, just so you can see the quick zoom in. We only need this one tooth original, so we deal with this before we array this. So we have one tooth only selected. We need to cut that out, delete the rest, paste it all back in. So we're back to this stage, pre-array. Now, in the perspective window, you need to zoom in quite finely and pick the outer points again. 2, make sure you've got the outer points and not this one close to it. Select all 4 of the outer points. Once you have them selected, I'm going to work in the back view. Now this is very important. Make sure your mode is set to origin. Selection will not do. As we created this disk around the origin, we are going to array it around the origin. So, again, multiply, we're going to use the extender plus. I'm going to show you by clicking the button, and hopefully you'll catch the little flash that it works here, to show you that I'm actually working. So, click the button now, once and once only. Visibly, nothing has changed, but it has actually added this extra row of polygons. We're going to use the H to stretch. We cannot use size because this has depth, so H to stretch, again in a diagonal manner, holding down Control to constrain the proportions. Click, drag. You'll see that these points are now dragged towards the origin itself, hence working in the origin. Again, it doesn't matter on the distance you drag down, this will represent the distance of the centre of your sprocket. This can be altered at any stage. So, that's good enough. drop the tool. Okay, I'm going to zoom in slightly. Because we used the origin, it has now kept this angle here is the correct angle for butting up our 15 rayed teeth for the rotation. So, radial array, 15, I won't merge, and OK to all of this. So, this has now patterned our tooth 15 times around. It's not merged at this stage, so it won't smooth between the gaps. As before, we align these, they will be correctly aligned, and because we use the origin and stretch proportionally, these will also be aligned and merged. So previously we had 60 points to merge, and this time we're looking for basically more than 60 points. We're probably looking for up to 90 points to be merged. So M to merge, OK, 90 points eliminated, press Tab to subbatch, and you'll see that it has actually merged our disc correctly. So, out of subbatch. Now we're back to the previous method for creating the core of this. So, loop select, view selection, more, select loop, P for polygon, deselect. Same on the opposite side. Select 2, more, select loop, P polygon, deselect. Okay. Bridge stage, so select one polygon, select the other polygon, construct, combine bridge. It's now punched our hole through and connected everything in the centre. Subpatch, you'll see again we have this dragging here at the top, which is incorrect, and we have this pinching at the bottom here. So we need to do some bandsawing for sharpening. So same as before. Multiply, bandsaw pro. Clear this, as I used 2%, and I mirrored it before, so 2 and 98%. Nice sharp edges. Flip to the other side, don't forget that you have two sides to this. Bandsaw Pro, same operation, same settings. Finally, the centre. Bandsaw Pro, I'm going to clear this settings, because previously I used 10%, so I'm just going to use 10% for this again. And mirror. Drop the selection. We now have created our 15 teeth sprocket. If I subpatch this, put it into textured view, you can see this is the result. Nice sharp centre, nice sharp teeth with points at the top. The rollers for which will fit exactly within this section. So, good work so far. I'll show you we have a 15 tooth sprocket, we have our 36 tooth sprocket, so that's the two. We've also got a master tooth in case we ever wanted to change and create sprockets with different numbers of teeth. This is the master tooth corresponding to the pitch. So if you wanted to create a 37 or 38 or 40 tooth sprocket or a 72 tooth sprocket or 12 tooth sprocket, whatever your ratio, this is the master tooth that you will use as your guide. And then you'll use the same method that we did for this, bearing in mind that all of the previous stages of this tutorial are relevant to creating the chain path for these particular sprockets only. Okay, and finally we have all of our links, we've named all of our surfaces, and we have named all of our layers. So, I think that pretty much concludes this part 3. So this is your reward. I hope it was worth it. Now that I'm very tired, I'm going to go to bed, so I'll call it a night now. So part 4 is going to be unfortunately less rewarding. In fact, let's just face it, it's going to be quite tedious and fiddly and time consuming and repetitive. And if there's any other word I can think of, then I'm sure to let you know. But the end result's what we're after, and I think it's worth it. It's a nice tutorial. So, conclusion of this, good night, take care, see you in part 4. My name's Jeremy Snell, bye bye.